We all know that Sherlock Holmes used the Mind Palace and Hannibal Lecter used the Memory Palace as part of his medical studies, but how many of us have actually used the stories themselves to develop memory palaces, develop our Memory Palace networks in ways that help us make learning faster and more fun? The first time I used a Memory Palace based on a location in a novel was with The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It's kind of an elaborate detective story. It's got a lot of characters, and I thought I could use the cell where Adso of Melk sleeps. That's a very simple memory palace to start gathering the names of the characters. I don't know exactly why I had this idea, but I just got busy and I did it. And I made a simple drawing of what the cell is like, and then as new characters came up, I just started to stick their names in those memory palaces, and I found that I was able to track the story and enjoy it a lot more. And then from there, I realized that you could do this all the time and use those same memory palaces from novels to memorize anything that you want and basically mix it in with what I think are ultimately better memory palaces based on real locations. But variety is one of the keys of making your own practice with memory techniques better and stronger and just developing your sophistication. So if you like developing your sophistication as a learner who uses memory techniques, if you're not already subscribed, make sure to get subscribed so you don't miss a thing as we go deeper into more and more sophisticated levels and ways to use these techniques. And for the love of memory, hit that thumbs up so the robots never forget that we humans care about the great memory tradition and the tradition that we are keeping alive together for future generations to come. Now, stories used to be involved in teaching memory techniques at a much deeper level. And one of the things that I made a mistake, or I believe I may have made a mistake with, is thinking that Giordano Bruno, in his memory training books, made them difficult to exclude people who weren't serious. If you don't know Giordano Bruno, he wrote such epic tomes as On the Shadows of the Ideas, and in some of these books you are introduced to memory wheels, which some people think are memory palaces, but I don't think that's the case. In any case, there's no doubt about it. Books like this by Bruno and some of his other memory training books, they are challenging, but I think that actually he was writing either to people who really knew these techniques already because they had completed the trivium and the quadrivium, which included a memory training component, or he was writing to other people who were going to teach the techniques to others. And why I came to think this is because I started to read some of Bruno's fiction. Now, Bruno's fiction came in the form of plays, but those plays included very clear, crisp, and direct instructions on how to use both the art of memory, or ars memorativa, and the art of combination, or ars combinatoria. I mean, it just doesn't get any more clear. He's not excluding people at all. He's including as many people as possible because he's embedded the instructions on how to use these techniques inside of stories. Let me give you an example. In the basic system of the classical art of memory, also known as the method of loci or memory palaces, you must follow a basic set of rules. To remember anything, convert them into images, and by them here, Bruno means the images that you're going to use to help you encode the information you don't know. So for example, if you're memorizing a name like Bruno, you're going to have a character like the movie character Bruno, and that's going to be something that you help yourself remember by placing all your associations in a memory palace to help you always be able to recall what it is that you use to use the memory palace technique. To retrieve those images, retrace your steps through the sequence of places, viewing and decoding each of the images as you go. The places should be well lit, not too far apart nor crowded together, and distinctive from one another. The whole structure should be clearly visualized. The path you take should be obvious so you will not get lost, and to facilitate retrieval, they should be visually striking and emotionally resonant. They may be terrifying, inspiring, or humorous. They should be visualized as clearly as possible. The images should not blend into the background of the places. If a thing that is to be remembered is not easily visualized, then you may choose to encode letters or syllables of the name of the thing into a set of predetermined images. That description of the art of memory, obviously there's a little bit more to it than that, but that is so clear, crisp, and strikingly usable all embedded in a story. So when people go and read Bruno's more detailed manuals, I think he's assuming that they knew the techniques already and possibly had enjoyed some of his stories. I think Robert Fludd influenced me a lot in terms of using story elements as memory palaces, because he was quite adamant that you should use the theaters where you watched plays as memory palaces. Literally, he thought that using imaginary palaces would weaken your mind. Now, I think he's right that we should use real locations as much as we possibly can, just simply because it's faster, it's easier, and it's based on things we already remember, so it's truly a memory palace, not a memorized palace. But I don't think that means that we should never use memorized palaces, but he was on and on and on, I mean, literally for pages on end. Use memory palaces based on real locations, but he always talks about using the theater. Now, why? Well, partly because the theaters where those stories took place, they are giving you the associations so that, unlike Bruno, who teaches you that you should memorize your associations and use a memory palace to memorize those associations, you would just naturally have associations because you loved those plays so much. I mean, you would have a host of characters in your head already. King Lear, Goneril, etc. There's just many, many names that you would know. There's many locations that you would already know from the plays. And when you're trying to memorize new information, say you're learning a term like perspective or something, you could just use Prospero from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and you could use the very theater where you saw The Tempest as the memory palace and divide it up in ways that Robert Fludd describes, and then be able to just use the processes that get that information into long-term memory just by having enjoyed a story and then using the story. So a lot of this was in my head when I chose to use the cell where Adso of Melk sleeps in The Name of the Rose. And I've been using this technique ever since, selectively, when I feel like I want to remember the names of characters and different locations and other details as I go along. Also, I should say that using this technique has helped me with my own stories, such as this detective novel, Flyboy, which is about Detective Williams, who is losing his brain. He's got PTSD, he's got depression, and he needs to keep his job because otherwise he's not going to retire. And that's what is on his mind, which would be on a lot of people's minds, don't you think? So I have him utilize the charity of his best friend Jerome, who is the world's only blind memory champion, who teaches him how to use the techniques and integrate them into his everyday life, and they wind up becoming very, very useful to catch the most serious and sinister serial killer of David Williams' career. And unless you've been living under a rock, this novel is attached to a game called Memory Detective, and they go together, and we're going to play the game very, very soon. So if you want to be the first notified so you can grab a seat for the game and get this book, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/NS. Now, I designed parts of this book so that you can make imaginary memory palaces out of them, and I made particular locations that will allow you to imagine things in particular ways so that it's a little bit more friendly than having to scrape through it in your reading of other novels, just making things up. And there's also ways that things are positioned in space in this novel that we're going to make great use of. So if you're interested in that, magneticmemorymethod.com/NS, and you'll be the first to be notified when the game goes live and the novel is available. Now, if you want to get started with this in any novel that you read, the first thing I would suggest is say, yes, I'm going to give this a try. And then second, as you're reading, just keep your eye out for locations that would be useful as memory palaces. For example, I recently read A Noise Downstairs by Linwood Barclay. It has something to do with brain trauma and amnesia, and so that was what drew me to it. And instantly it has a number of locations, one of which is, of course, the basement. But whenever you have those kinds of things, you can imagine different parts of houses and so forth. There's also a office of a counselor, psychiatrist type character, and there's a variety of places. So just noticing that and starting to think about how that you could turn those locations into memory palaces is very, very useful and powerful. Now, as a second step, if you're just getting new to this, I suggest you draw those locations as you imagine them. This is going to give you great spatial memory exercise, great figural memory exercise, and of course a little bit of practice with just some basic drafting. So I'm not talking about art, I'm just talking about very simple drawings that help you deepen your understanding of that space. So for example, in this novel, there is a desk where the therapist sits, and then there's going to be a door, and instead of just, vaguely imagining it, I chart out what this is going to be like so that I can use it as a memory palace later. So let's say I want to remember the name of the therapist from this novel. Her name is Anna White. All I have to do is get some images and place them in the office I already made a memory palace of from this story. So Anna White, my friend Anna, is going to be in there, and she's probably going to be in a fist fight with Vanna White. And Vanna has Anna already in it, and maybe she's literally punching the V right out of Vanna White's head. Kind of weird image, but very, very memorable. And it's happening in a memory palace based on a location in this book. So memorize by placing associations in the memory palace. Now I got one last powerful tip for you, the most essential of them all. And before we get to that, thank you to everybody who has supported this project, either through your channel memberships, for getting one or more of my books or courses, and Team Magnetic and myself, we appreciate it so much, especially since it enables very, very long experiments like writing a detective novel that has all of these mnemonic characteristics built into it, so that we can take these techniques both back to the past, because Bruno taught the memory techniques in stories too, but also revolutionize them and innovate on them for the future through this game, which I believe is absolutely going to help you, and I hope that you'll join us for Memory Detective as well. But I just want to thank you so much for supporting this. All these years it's been wonderful, and it enables me to keep thinking about how to make this include more and more people, to make learning so much fun that it's absolutely irresistible. That's what the Magnetic Memory Method Project is all about, and I can't say thank you enough. Even though I know that it probably annoys you to say it over and over and over again. But that's how we remember, right? And my gratitude is absolutely 100% exploding. And a lot of that has to do with using memory techniques so much. They've reconditioned my mind not to forget the present moment. And that's what I hope for all people. And in the italic Hermetic tradition that some people think Bruno belonged to, I don't know if he did or not, they call that the Stella Fissa, the fixed star. And that's what I think we can all have in our mind, that fixed star of glowing joy. And all the more so when we start to enjoy fiction better, use fiction purposefully, and have endless games that we're playing all the time. Playing games that encourage us to play again and again, and then play some more. And that ultimately is the most important step when you're going to use any kind of memory palace, but especially memory palaces based on fictional locations, which is to revisit that information without cheating, to really stretch your mind and try to call back what was in there. So here's a little exercise for you. Do you remember what I was trying to remember in the memory palace based on the Linwood Barclay novel? If you can try to stretch and bring that back, well then you have a little bit of memory exercise, but you're going to form that memory. I'm doing it now. I'm thinking, okay, so it was in the therapist's office. I had my friend Anna there, and she was punching the V right off the head of Vanna White. So that character's name must be Anna White. Now, this is a very, very simple example, but it's the same thing that you would do with foreign language vocabulary, entire foreign language sentences. You would do it with formulas. You would do it with whatever it is that you feel called to memorize. This would be notes in a scale or one of the modes. It would be chemical formulas. It's just everything under the sun. You need to stretch yourself and practice recalling information without cheating, without looking at the answer. So one of the best things that you can do is actually call it to mind first, going into your memory palace, trying to reconstruct the scene of the crime, as it were, where Anna is punching Vanna, and then allowing that to bring back the target information, and then writing it down before you pick up the book and see, was that person's name? And the more you can do this with longer and bigger sets of information, the more memories you're going to form, because this is called active recall. It is being able to sort of suppress that need for instant gratification or solving the problem and just knowing what the answer is, which is basically rote learning, seeing the answer, and stopping yourself, actually creating a situation in which you produce it. And this is a challenging game, and the challenge never really goes away. And that's why you keep getting wonderful, wonderful memory exercise and brain exercise as you continue using the Memory Palace technique again and again and again, but using it correctly, which is to actually use it as a device, a mental environment where you bring back that information. And that's what forms the memories. It's so exciting and fun. You can actually feel neurogenesis, which is what I think leads to terms like Stella Fissa, that fixed star in the mind, where you just have this brightness that shines all the time. I think that's produced by the neurogenesis of continually using memory techniques to literally change the chemical structures of your brain and the content within it, which is essentially content contained in chemicals. So remember information that makes you happy, of course. So that's where you move from novels to actually memorizing information that you want to use in your career or to better the lives of other people as a top performer and professional in whatever it is that you feel called to do. And if novel memory palaces can help you out, well, that's fantastic, and now you never have to run out, because getting a new memory palace is as simple as picking up a book. And so if you loved this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. Please get subscribed if you're not already, and if you want to play this game, join us at magneticmemorymethod.com/NS, and you'll be able to have access to this novel Flyboy, which has some unique characteristics built into it so that you can have even more fictional memory palaces and practice together in a game setting that's going to give you that neurogenesis and that shining of the mind. And for more on how that you can get this into daily practice so the shining happens faster, not the Stephen King shining, the Stella Fissa shining, then you should consider watching my video on memory palace habits next.